we just felt peace. Like, this is temporary. Like, you know, this is not going to be a forever thing.
Which was uncomfortable. It was uncomfortable.
It was very uncomfortable.
It was very uncomfortable to be in the middle and not know how long we were going to be there. And that felt very much like the wilderness.
Yeah, we talked about being the Israelites wandering the wilderness in the desert
I was wanting to take the 4-day journey, not the 40-year journey. So I was really hoping that it was not going to be a long time that we were in between.
Well, welcome to the We Bring Life podcast, where we discuss topics and tell stories that will bring you life. One of the ways that we can bring life to one another is by sharing how God has been working in our lives, sharing the testimonies of how he's shown up and answered prayer. And joining us today in the studio are Ryan and Julianne Peterson, and they are here to share about a time where they were in a difficult circumstance and how they just saw God move through that. And I've known you guys for quite a while, and I've actually kind of walked alongside you through this particular testimony part of your story. And immediately when you shared it with me, I was like, you've got to share that. And then this podcast happened, and I'm like, hey, this is the perfect opportunity. Yeah. So thank you guys for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, we're excited.
Happy to be here.
Good. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself? I know you guys. I've known you guys for over 5 years now, maybe?
Yeah, probably 5.5.
Yeah, 5.5 years through small groups, Bible studies, mom play dates, family get-togethers. But tell us a little bit about your family makeup.
Well, we are Ryan and Julianne Peterson. We have been married 9 years. We have 4 kids. Ryan is a welder, a firefighter, and a paper boy, and I'm a stay-at-home mom.
Julianne's a full-time manager of a household.
Yeah.
Yes, that is a lot.
Yes. And then, I don't know, we just spend our summers especially boating and fishing. He likes to hunt. I like to bake sourdough. And that's kind of my newest passion. But, well, I guess newest is in the last 3 years. But, you know, it's fun.
Well, and I've been a recipient of the sourdough and of the fishing.
Oh, that's great.
We don't
That's right. I
fish.
forgot about that.
I think we need to start, though. But yeah, I remember that. I was like, this is the first time I've done a fish fry. And it was great. And yeah, we've really appreciated how you guys have been an encouragement to us. And we've gleaned a lot of wisdom from you guys, too. So I know you guys have been walking with the Lord for a long time, and I'm sure that you have a bunch of little testimonies in your larger testimony, but share the specific story that happened this past year.
Well, it all started in June. I had been working at a company for 7.5 years. Everything was good. Everything was great. I had a very solid job, no complaints.
Very good at that job.
Had very good reviews. One supervisor was like, "Man, you're a model employee," and everything was great. And then one day, I actually was just talking to a coworker and invited this coworker to church, and was talking to the coworker, and they had asked me about, like, why do I act this way or act that way, and I talked about it. Well, it's because I'm a Christian, and sometimes my life is the only Bible that somebody gets to read. And then I just closed off by inviting them to church, and that was the end of the conversation. And the next day I got called up to my supervisor's office, and I was terminated from my job for being open about my faith in the workplace. And it definitely came as a big surprise to me and to all of my coworkers. I come to find out everybody was very shocked that I had been let go. Nobody knew it was coming. Everyone was very surprised that it had happened.
Including your direct supervisors.
Including, yes, my direct supervisors. So I actually, like I said, no problems ever with the company, and I got let go, and I drove home, And I walked in the door at like 10:30, and Julianne looked at me and she just said, "Did you get fired?" And I said, "Yes, I did."
Yeah.
And she was like, "What?" And I was like, "Well, yes, I did." And she just kind of sat down and said, "Why? What happened?" And
like you were joking. You were
no,
did you have a feeling?
I had a feeling. I had a feeling, a strong feeling the night before. So even the night before, I had a feeling that something big was about to happen. And I almost said it to Ryan, but I thought, well, this must just be anxiety. I'm not going to give it too much thought. And that day I had even been listening to this song that's inspired by the book of Job. And I had just been listening to that song, and God was really speaking to my heart. And I'll touch on that more a little bit later. But I had a feeling for quite a while that he was done with that company. We, for years, thought that was the company he was going to retire from. But for the last, 6 months, I felt God prompting my heart that it was time for something else. And that just seemed wild to us. We really liked that company, or so we thought. And he was really good at his job. He loved what he did.
Things were good.
Yeah. But there were a couple things that God was preparing us for this moment. Even a few weeks before that, we were fishing, and we had a conversation about this company, we'll call it Company B, that he had worked for 12 years ago. And I felt like I should tell Ryan, I think you should quit your job and contact Company B. And I didn't say that because that felt wild. Like that, why would I say that? Why would, and even if I had, he probably would have been like, why? What? Like that, why do you want me to do that? So I didn't say that at that time, but we did have a conversation about Company B.
Yeah, I actually jokingly said, "Hey, look, Company B is hiring."
Yeah.
I remember them from 12 years ago. Yeah, I was there.
Yeah.
And it was just like, yeah, right, whatever. No, things are good where I am.
Yep. And we'll touch on, maybe this will come full circle too, is for the last 3 months probably before he had been let go, is I had a strong feeling that God was telling us to pay off our house. And so strong that I even told Ryan, God is telling us to pay off our house. I don't know how. I don't know why.
Me neither. It was my reaction.
Yes.
She's like, God's telling me to pay off our house. And I said, okay.
Yeah, he was like, did he tell you how that was going to happen?
You going to go buy some lottery tickets?
Right.
And that was the thing. We joked about like the lottery, or like, are we going to get like an inheritance? Or
And I even said, when he said how, and we kind of joked about the lottery and stuff, I said, I don't know how, but I do know it will be at once. I said, I promised the Lord that if we got enough money to pay off our house all at once, I promised him it would go to our house. I said, that is blind faith. I have no idea what will come of that. I have no idea why, when, how.
Yeah.
I don't know. And so, but I'm just telling you this now because that way, if the time comes, it kind of gives me a little bit of accountability. It can't be like, actually, we kind of need a new car.
You speak it out loud. You tell it to another person.
Yes.
Yeah. Completely.
And so I did that and said that. And later through his job loss, what we're getting from that company will pay off our house. All of it.
Wow.
It's all paid off. We'll get it next year?
December.
Next December, but we already have
We're
the
hoping
numbers.
Jesus returns before then.
Aren't we all? But it will. We couldn't have seen that coming. That is wild. That definitely was not the way I was thinking that it would happen. I really had no idea, but that wasn't it, And so that was really just like kind of the first instance of like God's story unfolding like, wow, we really have no part in this. Like we really, this cannot be of our own doing. Right. This is a bigger story, and it really started to feel like a privilege to be a part of, even though losing your job certainly isn't fun.
Right.
It felt like, especially at that point, it felt like, okay, what are we going to be able to watch God do? So he came home. It was 10:30. I said, "Did you lose your job?" And he kind of looked at me like, or I said, "Did you get fired?" And he kind of looked at me like, "Why would you even think that, really?" You know?
Right.
And
Right.
Like, what kind of a question is that?
yeah, I
Where
really
did that
Thank you,
even?
for welcoming
Like,
me.
yeah, I know.
Yes.
Like, where did that even come from?
But we processed it for like a minute, and we both said, "Okay, go to Company B." And so he went to Company B, and
Yeah. So I actually, I had called John Brayland, and I was like, "Hey, I just got fired for being open about my faith at work. Do you have any wisdom?" And he goes, "Well, I don't know. Some people would say you could sue the company, or you could just accept it and see what the Lord has in store." I said, "Well, I've never been in a courtroom, and I don't want to go to a courtroom." He goes, "All right, perfect. Well, I guess, we'll pray about it, but the Lord has a plan for you. So, I mean, just have faith." And I was like, all right, then, that's kind of where we were both at anyways. I went into Company B. Now, mind you, I hadn't seen the guy who runs that shop in 12 years. And now it was he and one other person.
that was
in
the
that
entire company.
It was a company of two, and they were looking to hire a third. And I walked in the door, and not the guy I knew, but the other guy came out. He said, "Hey, what can I do for you?" I said, "Oh, I'm looking for the boss." And he goes, "Oh, he's busy right now. He's actually taking a bathroom break. What can I do for you?" And I said, "Oh, I'm here about a welding job." And he said, "Oh, we were actually expecting you. Yeah, come on in." And I was like, "You're expecting me? Okay." I wasn't expecting me.
I wasn't expecting
So
you.
here I am. I walk back, and the boss came out. I was like, "What's up, boss?" And he goes, "Ryan, what are you doing here?" And I said, "Well, I'm here for a welding job." And he went, "What do you mean you're here for a welding job?" So I told him what happened at Company A. I just got fired or terminated for being open about my faith. And he was just kind of like didn't know what to say. And I said, "Okay, how about a weld test? And then we talk. My weld helmet's in my truck." And he goes, "Yeah, sure. Yeah." And he tells his coworker, "Go get some metal for his weld test." I wasn't ready for this. And I was just like, the other guy said that they were expecting me. I don't understand. So I went through my weld test, and he said, "Okay, well, do you want to," this was on a Thursday. He goes, "Do you want to start tomorrow or Monday?" And I said, "Well, let's start Monday, so we have like a weekend to process this, because this is kind of a lot, all going on at once." Now, this was like an hour or less after I had been terminated from Company A. So it was just like, everything's
Bam, bam.
happening at once. Well, come to find out, there was another guy who was going to be there for a weld test.
That they'd already really planned on
that
hiring.
they had already planned on hiring, had basically offered him a job. He was just going to show up and do some paperwork and a weld test and a drug test and whatever, and they were going to hire him.
Yeah, you beat him there by like 1 minute.
Yeah, so
'Cause-
when I walked in, that's why the worker guy was like, "Oh, yeah, we've been expecting you."
Yeah.
But then when I walked through the door, the boss was like, "Ryan?" Like, what?
And everything from there really lined up. The wages, he was willing to work with you with the
Yeah.
wages, the hours, because the shop was 9 to 5, and Ryan was like, "I don't really want to work 9 to 5. Can we do 7 to 3?" So that worked out really well. He was willing to work with you, but the problem is there was no benefits. So that was kind of a downside. Is absolutely no benefits.
No health insurance, dental insurance, life, like literally nothing. It was your hourly wage.
Yeah, but I mean, we were like, well, the Lord clearly directed our steps, so we have peace with starting regardless. Let's just see how this goes. And it went well. I mean, he liked the job, he liked the company. But a week or two into it,
Yeah.
all of a sudden, Company B said, I changed my mind. I'm not going to be able to do the hours that you wanted or the wages.
It was like, we've had these hours for 10 years and now you're doing different hours. It's just not going to work. We need you to work 9 to 5.
And for us, that really confused us because it felt very like, wow, this all lined up so perfectly. Lord, I felt like you were guiding our steps. What just happened? Like, what? No, we kind of threw us into confusion a little bit of like, where do you want us right now? What do you have for us? Did we make the right decision? I thought I was following your piece, but maybe we weren't. And so, and at the same time, Ryan had a second company pursuing him.
There was two other places through temp agencies where like,
really pursuing him. Yeah, calling him every day, multiple times a day.
Texting and emailing and
saying,
calling.
like, they already
give you $7 an hour more than what you make.
Lots of benefits. Yeah, it was...
Good health insurance.
On paper,
hours.
On paper, it was the better choice.
By a long shot.
Yes. But I didn't have peace about it. And neither really did you, other than... on paper, this is what we should do.
Well, it's something that I can do. I know I can do it, but something seemed off.
So we fasted for a week. We took a week off of social media, and every time we wanted to go on social media, we just prayed about it, and we just prayed for an entire week.
Which led to praying a lot,
yes.
by the way. You don't realize how often you pick up your phone to check Facebook or whatever when you're just like, oh, yeah, I'm just going to, no, hold on. Okay, well, now I'm just going to pray about it because that was our fasting.
Right, and it is, fasting is one of those things that we see it in the Bible, but it's one of those things that we don't necessarily practice often.
You don't hear a lot of people.
You don't hear a lot of it, but I think that is a good reminder too when you're faced with a big decision and you're waiting to feel God's peace. Yeah. And
it led to a lot more clarity and a lot more peace.
Yeah, we had to turn off.
We were not distracted.
Yeah, we had to turn off all other communication really to hear the still small voice of God. We really had to calm our hearts and our minds and just be still in where the Lord was guiding us. And it took a week. I'm glad it was only a week. We didn't quite know how long it would be. We said, well, we'll go until we feel peace, and that's it. And so, after a week, we felt peace about staying. Even with Company B, Company B, even with the hour changes and the wage changes. And then we kind of just continued on for, I don't know, a month and a half or so you were there after that. And after church one day, during that time. Yeah,
I was there for a total of 9 weeks.
Yeah, during that time, we still felt like it wasn't it permanent. Yeah. Like we felt like it was in between.
Yeah. But you didn't feel peace about any of your other options.
Yeah.
So even though it would have been like the world's peace. Like a better package
because it was like at Company B, I got 1 hour of PTO a week, which is not very much. But I was like, I feel like I have more freedom than I've ever had because we just felt peace. Like, this is temporary. Like, you know, this is not going to be a forever thing.
Which was uncomfortable. It was uncomfortable.
It was very uncomfortable.
It was very uncomfortable to be in the middle and not know how long we were going to be there. And that felt very much like the wilderness.
Yeah, we talked about being the Israelites wandering the wilderness in the desert a lot.
was wanting to take the 4-day journey, not the 40-year journey. So I was really hoping that it was not going to be a long time that we were in between because it was uncomfortable not knowing what was next. And then on a Sunday after church, I told Ryan, I feel like God's about to move.
Oh yeah, we were grocery shopping.
Yeah, we were pulling into Aldi, and I said, I feel like God's about to move. And the song "God's About to Move" came on literally as I was getting that out of my mouth, and I was like, Ryan, did you hear that? I was like, that cannot be a coincidence. And the next day, Ryan goes to work, and Company B
goes, I don't know what to tell you. We've literally not had this happen in 12 years. We're a company of 2. We've gone to 3. We've gone back to 2, then up to 3, then back to 2 because people have quit for whatever reason. But we have so much work that we're expecting minimum like 60 hours a week. it all fell through, and I have no work.
For the next 6 months.
For the next 6 months.
At least.
And I was like, huh? He's like, I literally don't know what to tell you. This has never happened. We're an overflow for a different company. They've never had any problems, ever. They went from the overflow company went from an over $2 million a month revenue company to now they are lucky to scrape out $800,000 a month. Yeah. They don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on. This has never happened.
So you lost a second job all within the span of 9 weeks.
So he was like, and so the boss is like, I don't know what to tell you. This has never happened, but I'm not going to let you go today. I can give you a week, but you're going to be sweeping the floor for a week. You're going to be organizing shelves for a week. Go find something else. Yeah. And I was like, well, what am I going to find? Okay, well, I had some other kind of jobs in my back pocket that I had reached out to, but one of them actually said, we're really interested in you, but not right now, but we're going to keep your information for when we're interested. But he was like, yeah, go and just find a different job this week, go do well tests and stuff, but just work the 9 to 5 sweeping and stuff. I'm like, okay, well, now I really don't know what I'm going to do.
Well, he texted me and said, all the work fell through, just so you know. And I said, well, God's on the move. Like, to me, that was God moving us. And that was God making it clear. Now it's time to go to the next step. And on the way home.
Yeah, on the way home, I went, oh, look, somebody put up a banner. What's it say? I drove past it and I went, oh, hiring welders.
Yeah.
And
not welders, welder.
And I looked at the company. I went, I've literally never even heard of them before. Yeah.
So he worked right there.
So I just called the number and it's next door to where I used to work. Called the number. I said, hey, I see you guys are hiring welders. And they said, yeah, we're looking for one welder. I went, oh, cool. Okay, I saw your banner. When did you guys put that up? They're like, oh, we actually just put it up. And I was like, oh, cool. Not to sound dumb, but what do you guys do there? And they're like, okay, well, are you a welder? And I said, yeah, I've been welding. I told them about myself. I said, well, what do you do there? I need a job. And they're like, well, when do you need a job? And I said, I have till Friday. And they were like, oh, okay, well, that's fast. Sure.
They don't usually hire that fast.
Yeah. We're still here, actually. Come on back in. And some of the companies I had talked to had been like, yeah, we're hiring, but go online and fill out the thing. And I was almost kind of like, sorry, am I bothering you by calling you about this welding position or what? They're like, and then this company will call company C.
Yeah, company C.
They're like, we're still here. Come on back. And I said, well, I got fire training in an hour, and I'm going to go home and see my wife and kids. And the lady on the phone was like, keep your wife and kids a priority. Go home. We'll be here tomorrow. Come back. I went back, and I had an interview and stuff, and learned about the company and what I was going to be needing to do, and the weld processes and stuff.
And the cool part about that is the welding that they do at this new company, Company C, is the welding that he was doing at Company B for the last 9 weeks, which he hadn't done for, what did you say, like 15 years?
That's what I was going to just say is I got out of Company A, and at Company B, they're like, okay, well, we need you to do this, this, and this. I'm like, well, shoot, I know how to do that. It's been a long time, like
15 years.
At a minimum,
relearning
10
a skill.
years. I was like,
it was a totally different process.
I was like, sure, I can do that, but it might take me a day or two to get back into it. And then Company C was like, well, do you know how to do this? And I was like, you're not going to believe it.
Yes, I
just spent the last 9 weeks doing that. Well, do you know how to do this? I'm like, and I was doing that, and we need you to know how to do this. And I'm like, I cannot hardly even put this into the right words. I just spent 9 weeks doing this, and this.
9 weeks preparing him.
Done this for a long time. So it's like I got a paid 9-week apprenticeship or something, getting ready for Company C.
Yeah. And we found out it was kind of full circle that they have a part down in Louisiana, and Ryan on a video found this video of that part down in Louisiana and said, wow, that part that it's hooking up into, I built. Like his first
Yeah,
job.
I built that in
first
2009.
Yeah, his first welding job out of college. He went down to Louisiana and built this building. And now what he's doing hooks into that building, that specific building that he built.
So there's a term that my dad always said for things like this. He always called them coincigods.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
like,
Yes.
this is crazy. What are the chances?
It felt
you know?
like a very confirming moment. Like God was saying, this is what I've had for you. This is where I want you. Because one of the things he really didn't like about Company A is they treated their workers like garbage and nothing but, I mean, no better than like cattle, basically.
Yeah, and like the bottom of the totem pole.
And this new company is the very opposite.
Yeah.
And so the Lord
There's
has
some serious
answered
employee value there.
Yeah, the Lord, it's years of answered prayers.
It's just really cool to see how God lined up and provided for your family.
Yeah,
Because
we didn't miss a step.
And after fasting, telling us like, stay at Company B. That's where I have you.
Yeah,
Because
if we
had I
moved,
gone to the other places that were like offering me more money and more benefits, I would never have seen
because we did learn more about that company, and it was not a good company that we were or that was pursuing him. It was,
but it was like I would have never even seen the banner of hiring welders, and who knows where I would have been.
Yeah, you would have
had
settled
we not
on something.
Listened to like the still small voice and fasted and prayed.
Our neighbor who had kind of walked the journey with us said after he'd gotten his job at Company C, said, what a roller coaster, you must have whiplash. And I thought, I don't, because our eyes were fixed on Christ. And when I was a dancer and in my younger years, when we would turn, we would have a fixed spot so we didn't get dizzy. And during that whole journey, our fixed spot was Christ. And it kept us from getting dizzy. It kept us from losing our way or having whiplash, so to say, because our God doesn't change. And so though everything else around us was changing, we knew who held our family, who the real provider for our family is.
It was really just like an unexplainable peace.
Yeah.
It was like, but for us it was explainable, but for people like our neighbors are just like, how are you handling this?
So would you say there were any points in there where you did question, God's plan for you, or did you have that fixed mindset? I'm sure there are listeners here who have gone through job loss and the unknown of what's next. What does God have for me? And maybe in the timeline, in your case, you were offered a job like an hour later or whatever, And for some people, that's not the case, and those doubts can creep in.
Yeah. I wouldn't say that I ever had doubting, but I did let God know an itinerary would have been nice. Like an outline of what was to expect. That would have been nice. Of just, like, let's just show us the next step, Well,
that was kind of the thing was we feel like the Israelites wandering through the desert, but the promised land is ahead of us. But not knowing what the promised land was or whatever.
Or how long the journey was going to take.
And I actually went home from work at Company B one day, and I just sat down. I was sitting on the couch, and I was just confused. And I was like,
very
man,
discouraged.
I was like, I just, I don't know how long this is going to take. I know this is temporary. And our oldest son, Logan, walked past and looked at me, and he went, "Did you get fired from your new job?" I was like, "No. Why?" And he was like, "You're just sitting on the couch and you just look like you got fired again." And I was like, "Well, buddy, I'm just kind of confused about what's happening right now, and I'm trying to process it." He was like, "Oh, okay." And then he left the room, and I was like, "What was that?"
I must really look down right now for him to be like that.
It was a good witness to our kids, to our older kids anyway, of how to trust God through it, so.
Yeah. And I think there's so much benefit to sharing our stories. And over in Scripture, we see in the Old Testament, when God has provided miraculously for the Israelites, they set up these standing stones for them to look back, for a monument, a physical monument they can look at and go, oh, remember when God did that for us and showed up for us? And I think we need those constant reminders. And sometimes, for whatever reason, we maybe don't share our stories. And And so this is an encouragement to all of our listeners too. Like, don't take your story for granted. Share it to be used for God's glory, not your own. This is nothing that you guys could have foreseen.
This is God's story.
Yeah, it's not something we could have done on our own or predicted or controlled.
Yeah, and in the New Testament too. So we see that in the Old Testament, those building those physical stone monuments for them to look back on. But in the New Testament, Peter describes believers as living stones, and in 1 Peter 2:5. And the idea of that he had was that he wanted his readers, or the people hearing that piece of scripture, he wanted them to think of themselves as people who live out their faith so boldly that others would take notice and see how God has worked in their lives. And you said to your neighbors, you know, it was such a good witness to them to hear that, of like, oh, like Ryan lost his job, like, oh no. Yeah. And yet you guys were just steady and had a peace and a calm. And so I think that's
we
really
both
cool.
also did a lot of Bible reading for 9 weeks.
So what would be your takeaway or your encouragement to bring life to people who are in similar situations where either they have gone through something terrible, like a job loss or a death in the family or whatever it may be, and they're waiting on God's answer and looking for to step into his will. They're wanting wisdom and discernment and where to go next. And they're in the waiting process. What would you say to them?
I would say seek the Lord.
Absolutely.
And just keep seeking him. And when you're confused, go to his word. The word is living. And so that's really how we both felt the Lord speaking to us in a way. That's how we felt him guiding us and molding us. And just that's really, you know, before he lost his job at Company A, I had started a read the Bible in a year plan, and it's chronological. And so you start in Genesis, but if you're reading the Bible chronologically, Job is like kind of in the middle of Genesis. So when he had lost his job, I had just finished up the book of Job, and what really stood out to me in the book of Job is at the very end when God finally responds back to Job and in a sense rebukes him and says, who are you? Who are you to question me? Where were you when I formed the world and told the boundaries where to go? And that was a rebuke to Job, and it humbled Job. However, it also comforted Job. That theophany or appearing of God to him brought comfort to him, because one of his greatest anguishes is that he thought that his father was separated from him because God hadn't responded to him up until this point. And so he thought he was separated from God. And so even though it was a rebuke and it was humbling, it did bring him comfort. And that really was the foundation for me going forward. I had said I was listening to that song that was based off of Job, which was based off of those verses of where were you when I formed the world? Where were you when I told the seas to where they had to stop? And so that really laid the groundwork in my own heart of who am I to question God? I'm here to trust God and seek God and just trust that he's got a plan for us and he will reveal it to us in time. And then from there, I went through Exodus, you know, in the Bible, in my reading plan, and God was speaking to us about the wilderness and that it was a time of preparation. Mm-hmm. And while an uncomfortable time of preparation, he provided, so perfectly to the Israelites as he would to us. He provided perfectly for us. We didn't miss a step, really.
And we were talking about, like, you know, with the fasting and with where we were at with Company B, she was reading about like Joseph and how when his, you know, brothers sold him into slavery and then, you know, the whole thing happened and then they came back and Joseph was like, guys, I forgive you. It's okay. And what happened was scary and bad and terrible.
But it was the will of God.
the will of the Lord would not have come to fruition if you didn't do that. So it was the will of the Lord that you would do that. But now I can see it, like in hindsight. And as you know, she's telling me this, I was in the book of Jeremiah, and in Jeremiah, I stumbled upon the verse that I was like, man, I've heard this verse like 10,000 times, and it's never stuck so hard. Like when the Lord is like, for I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord, and for future and hope. And it's just like, it's not like, yeah, I know the plans. Just
He declares it.
Don't worry, like, yeah, I got it. It's like, no, like, for I know the plans I have for you. And it was like, wow, seeing that like live out. And that was just proof that the Bible really is like living, active word. It's not like, oh yeah, well, what can I find in here that I can relate to? It's like just reading it every day. It was like, wow, this is very relevant. And I was in a different section of the Bible than she was, and both sections were relevant to where we were in that very moment.
Yeah, it was funny because I was telling Ryan, I'm reading about how Joseph was forgiving his brothers, because obviously we battled a little bitterness towards the one person.
If you've ever read Jeremiah.
Yeah, it's a very angry book. Jeremiah is very angry at the Israelites.
People didn't listen to God, and God's
for like
mad.
23 years he was preaching to them. And so I said, yeah, Joseph forgave his brothers because it was the will of the Lord. And he goes, well, I'm reading about how angry God was
at the people who didn't listen to him. And I'm reading about what's going to happen. And I'm just like, Lord, we fasted.
Yeah. It was like, well, yeah, we were joking that, we can both be a little angry and maybe also forgive the person who decided. But you mentioned in the Old Testament the stones, and that also came up for me. I went through the book of Joshua, and that kind of came up as we were fasting. And what stood out to me then is when they were crossing the Jordan, the priests had to step into the waters before God had stopped the waters. And that really is what that felt like for us, is we had to step into the scary, the unknown, of denying a good job with good benefits and say yes to what the unknown of the future. And we had to step in and trust God before we understood God and understood God's will. And really after this all came to be, we really both felt like it was a privilege to walk through this. While it was hard, and
we didn't feel that way the whole way through.
Yeah, there were hard moments,
in hindsight, it's like,
moments.
yes.
Right.
And going back to your question, I would say the only thing that kept us grounded is seeking God. When we didn't know where to go, we knew... When we didn't know where to turn in relation to his job, we knew where to turn in relation to our faith. And we knew who the ultimate provider was to our family. And we know that he never changes, and that he has good things. So we knew if we obey God, if we follow God's peace, that's what we said over and over again. Is we
God's peace, God's peace, God's peace.
We don't force anything.
You don't panic and force anything.
Yes, like sometimes, I can make this work. I can make it work. But if I have to make it work, is it God's will? Am I not having peace if I'm having to piece a bunch of things together? If, like we could have probably justified paying our house off of this way and this way and this way, or buying a lottery ticket. But if it's God's will, it's God's peace, and we almost have nothing to do with it. And so, like, even with his job, I kept saying, I feel like our next step will smack you in the face. He kept looking online for different jobs, and I said, I don't feel like you're going to find it online.
None of these sound right.
I kept saying, I think God is going to show it to you, and part of that was just walking in obedience. That was hard.
And listening for the Spirit's leading.
Yeah.
I've had those times too, where it's been very like the feeling of washing over me, where it's either, no, I don't feel like this is where he wants us, or actually, you're opening this door, and you take those steps forward. He opens another door. You take the next step forward. He opens another door. You're like, okay, God.
He doesn't give you an outline. He doesn't give you an outline, does he? No,
right.
But which is probably a good thing.
And that's just kind of like, almost like in closing, we felt like, I'm pretty sure it's in Habakkuk, when Habakkuk is like, Lord, what are you doing? And God's like, I'm not telling you. And he's just like, Lord, tell me. And he's like, even if I told you, you wouldn't believe me. So no.
Yeah.
And it's just like, it's like, that's kind of how I feel in closing, in the end. I'm like, even if God was to tell me, hey, I told your wife this, I got you guys talking about that, I pulled you from here, you went to there, you avoided this, you're going to say no to these things, this is going to feel weird, and then that's going to fall through, and then you're just going to see something, and then that's going to work out. I would have been like, excuse me?
Our track kind of was like that, like mouse roller coaster, you know, where you're like going straight, and then all of a sudden you're just like going down at a 90-degree angle, and that's kind of how it was. It was like, okay, here's our track, and then nope, all of a sudden we're going the opposite way, and it's very confusing. But we really thankfully didn't get whiplash from it. And if we had known the track set before us, we wouldn't have had the opportunity to learn God's still small voice. And that feels like a privilege to grow that in relationship to him. You know, God's presence in our life was much richer and much more of a blessing than we could have even imagined.
And now, moving forward, when you're in another situation, because you know this life is going to throw different things at us.
We are not done.
You have that to look back on. So I want to encourage listeners, if you haven't already, journal. Write some of these things down, how God has shown up, so that when you are going through your next hard season, you can look back on it and go, wow, like he provided then, he's gonna provide now. And he gives us his word. And you were able to read in Job's experience, the Israelites, you're able to go back and see that his word is living, it's active, it's applicable to today, it's still relevant. And so I just want to encourage you, be in God's word, pray, maybe fast as you're going through decisions.
Be in God's word now.
Well, yes.
Be
Don't
in God's
even
words
wait.
now.
Be in God's word now. Yes. And share it. And share your testimony. So thank you guys for both being here today. I'm excited to see what God does next. In your story.
Yes. Me too. Thanks for having us.